Got-a-minute meetings. Have you ever heard that term? You know, when someone comes up to your desk and says, "Hey, Alex, you got a minute?" It's never a minute. And even if it was, and you're engaged in a deep work, focused time block, it throws you completely off track. So let's say you're in flow. And flow is that state of productivity where you're focused, you're dialed in, time seems to move more slowly. You're just completely immersed in your work. I think you know the feeling. Hopefully you do. If interrupted, you may never find that flow state again that day. So this video is going to be super helpful for anyone who works in a typical office work environment, especially if you're working a condensed work week, like a 4-day work week, a 5 or 6 hour work day. It'll be super relevant for you. In this video, I want to cover got-a-minute meetings. This was a term coined by Chet Holmes. He's a famous corporate consultant, motivational speaker. He wrote the book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. And in the video, I want to cover 2 main points. The first is the why and how behind why got-a-minutes are detrimental to productivity. And second, I want to cover how to deal with got-a-minute meetings. How do you deal with interruptions at your desk? So first point, how and why behind got-a-minute meetings. The second point is how to deal with them. So here's a few quick stats I want to share with you from a survey focused on U.S. office workers. It found that 71% of people reported that they frequently got interrupted at work. 71% were frequently interrupted at work. And almost half attribute interruptions to an unsuccessful day. Specifically, 44% said that they felt like their day was unsuccessful after frequently being interrupted at work. So I think you know the feeling. You're busy all day. You're getting pulled in 100 different directions by 100 different people. And at the end of that day, you have the sense of, I don't even know what I really accomplished today. So our CEO and founder Dave Rhodes wrote a great article on this subject called Death to Got-a-Minutes. So he makes the case that it's critical from a business culture, kind of from a leadership standpoint, to address this. He said that this was the single biggest productivity epiphany we had when we were originally kind of dialing in the 5-hour workday at Blue Street. His biggest argument in this article is drawing the correlation with got-a-minute meetings and Stephen Covey's dreaded quadrant 3. So if you're not familiar, Covey is he's like a time management, the master of time management. And he presents this brilliant 4-quadrant model in his famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's right here on my shelf. Most people that are into personal development know this book. So without getting too in depth, you need to know that quadrant 2 is where you want to be. That's where you're focused. That's where you do impactful work. That's where you want to be. And that falls in the quadrant under important and non-urgent. But got-a-minute meetings fall into quadrant 3, which is non-important but urgent. Urgent. Is it really that urgent? Listen to what Covey says falls into quadrant 3, and then you tell me. So he says that these fall into quadrant 3. Needless interruptions, unnecessary reports, irrelevant meetings, other people's minor issues, unimportant emails, voicemails, calls, tasks, so on and so forth. So it sounds familiar, right? Welcome to a typical office. The reason quadrant 3 is dreaded is because it destroys productivity. So it removes you from what you should be doing to what you think you should be doing, yet it yields low to no results. It just doesn't move the needle. If you stay in this mode too long, it's going to be hard to be very productive in a shorter work week, especially if you're working a 5 or 6 hour work day. You just can't work this way for very long. So you may be asking, well, Alex, what if it's truly urgent? Okay, so if you deem it truly urgent, like a crisis, it falls into quadrant 1, which is urgent and important. Okay, sometimes you have to fall into this mode, which means sometimes you have to be interrupted. But this has to be reserved for true crisis, because you can't stay in this mode all the time or you'll be super stressed out. You'll eventually be burnt out. And you won't accomplish anything proactive, nothing creative, nothing that you plan to do. So you don't want to get stuck in quadrant 1. You definitely don't want to be in quadrant 3. So how do we change this? How do we get away from that 44% of people that said when interrupted during the workday, they felt like they didn't accomplish anything that day? They felt like it was an unsuccessful day. So this leads me to the second main point: how to deal with got-a-minute meetings. What do you do when someone comes up to your desk and interrupts you? I've got 3 things that you can do. Starting with the most obvious, you can tell people not to interrupt you when they come up to your desk. It's not the most cordial way to deal with it. It's not the most ideal, but it's better than being interrupted. 2, you can put up something that signifies that you're in an engaged time block. So you can put an on-air sign or a do not disturb sign or something like that. These are sometimes very effective. I think that the third option is the most effective, and that is creating a system. Ideally a company-wide system, or at least at the department level, where everyone has a protected time block at the same time. So we've been running a 1.5 hour protected time block from 8 to 10:30 for several years now, company-wide. Everyone knows that we do not interrupt people during that time. If you've got a question, you do it before that block or right after that block ends. It's been so effective that we've even had a few other departments, particularly like customer-facing departments, add a second focused time block where people can't interrupt them during that time block. So the rest of that less important, less urgent, and or kind of reactive work, it gets booted to later in the day. It's eventually handled if it's even important enough to be handled. A lot of emails answer themselves if they go unanswered by the end of the day. These, of course, are not very important emails. They're barely moving the needle. So here's the last major point I want to make. This third option of creating a system, it changes the work culture. So over time, everyone starts to understand the value of not interrupting others. They truly start to see the value of setting aside protected time to become highly effective members of the team. To conclude, I want to ask you this. I want you to ask yourself, is it time to declare war on got-a-minute meetings? Can you eliminate or at least minimize interruptions in your workplace? I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to sharing more in my next video.